I'm Casey Sklar. I'm the H.O. Smith Endowed Director of the Arboretum at Penn State. I also am an affiliate professor in the Department of Entomology for Penn State University. And I'm also board vice president of the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. We protect everything that doesn't have a spine. And so some of it doesn't have any legs, or if it has more than 4 legs, we're always interested in conserving the little things that sustain our lives.
And what makes you the perfect guy to talk to about fireflies?
Well, first of all, I absolutely love fireflies. I'm a huge fan of fireflies. I actually, while I was born in the East, I actually grew up out West where we didn't have fireflies. So I go out and await the oncoming of fireflies wherever I can. It's one of my goals for research upcoming because, as we'll talk about, there are a lot of unknowns with firefly conservation. And so these are great questions that everybody can participate in figuring out the answers to. So, and I'm a landscaper by background. So a lot of what I do, even though I, have an academic degree and I do research, a lot of what I'm interested in has practical backyard applications for any person who enjoys or maintains landscapes, from natural landscapes to window box outside your door.
So tell me, I've heard that firefly research is kind of few and far between. Is that correct? And what do we know about firefly trends?
Yeah, so we know a good bit about what makes fireflies flash or not flash, and what's called bioluminescence, which is the chemical reaction that they have that makes them flash, and they flash in different patterns. So we've really studied a lot of that, and even the genetics and the chemistry behind that and the physiology behind that. We also are gaining a body of knowledge on why maybe fireflies aren't as abundant in some areas. A lot of that is the finger is pointed sometimes at light pollution, but it's also often pointed at our use of pesticides is something that could be there as well. But then there are a lot of other unknowns that have to do with seasonal weather patterns, how much moisture we get. And so while we know a lot about whether they're abundant or not abundant when they're adults and we see them, we actually don't know as much about how they spend about 10 and a half months out of the year, which is in soil. And they are really important predators of other pests, insects, and organisms. So they're good people, if you will, all year long. And so we're trying to understand that other part a little bit more. And that leads to obviously questions that you might have about what we can all do to conserve and protect them, because we all love them.
Do you think there's a climate change angle? As our climate warms, are fireflies going to be impacted?
Yeah, so when we look at climate impacts, there definitely are potential climate impacts that do that. Some of it has to do with weather extremes. So one of the working hypotheses can be how much rainfall a particular area is getting or not getting. When it gets that rainfall can influence firefly population and abundance for certain species. We also know that other weather patterns can impact when a firefly's food web is available, so what it has to be able to eat. And then there are other things that we just don't know in regard to that too. So it's more than just a temperature extreme. It has to do with, if we're seeing extreme temperatures and they're emerging later, that might mean that a source of food that was there or the amount of moisture that was there at that time can definitely drive that. So it's complicated, but it's simple. The short answer is climate impacts, yes. A lot of those things are things that we can think about or control ourselves at home, things we can do or things we can't do to address that. Oftentimes we find we like to think of it as, well, we're powerless to affect this change, but there are some really basic things that you can do, or even because we're lazy human beings by nature, things we don't do that actually help our firefly friends out.
Do you think, I know some people have said over the past couple of years, over the past decade or two, they've seen less fireflies than when they were a kid. Is that a valid statement, or do you think people are just moving and living in different places?
So I would say on the whole, Yes. And so when we get into things you can do or things you can't do that are suspect, um, first of all, irrigation patterns are one thing where we're developing more land and we're putting more land aside for houses. And so that's a different maintenance area around your house than, say, an agricultural field or a prairie or a natural area would be that you have at your disposal, or a wooded area that you would have to be able to go into. And all one has to do is fly in between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, or like I do, fly sometimes between Philadelphia and State College, and you can see you can see that land use change, but you can also see the other impact if you take the night flight, which is lights. And we have a lot more night lighting going on. The bringing in of LED light, while it saves energy, tends to saturate areas with bright light and fireflies, and that confuses fireflies. So there's some really good solid research data that shows that when the lights are saturated in that area, the fireflies can often be less responsive to that light. So I'm the first person to say, look, we all want to be safe, but there's also overdoing it. And you can direct your lights down to where you want to have be safe and secure. You can use motion sensitive lighting. You can also use different colors of light. So while any light can be negatively responsive to fireflies, you can use, say, a red colored light. And there's some ways to get fun with this around the home landscape where, you can have a motion sensitive red light or motion sensitive kind of paler green light. And some of those things can be less of an issue for fireflies. Not none, but certainly less than that bright white or bright light. And so things in that far red spectrum or that red spectrum, little less when you get to fireflies.
What are other conservation like efforts that I can do in my backyard to kind of boost my firefly population?
Yeah, I always think, it's great, particularly in our region of central Pennsylvania. Um, we want to think about the way that climate impacts often manifest with us is more water as downpour events. So thinking about how you manage water wherever you are and however you are. So plants that are more adapted to wetter conditions. Thinking about if you are a homeowner, for example, or a landowner, for example, you can set aside some water for a rain garden, or you're thinking about stormwater management in that aspect of keeping your grass a little higher, definitely helps. And then obviously avoiding the use of agricultural chemicals, especially some broad spectrum things that are going to be in the soil. And so, and that those sorts of things, especially contact poisons, are really going to impact those fireflies while they're in your landscape for longer during the year. And so, choosing to preserve pollinators, they will often, fireflies will often be around shaded areas, interfaces with wooded areas, depending on the species, or just out. It's not uncommon for me to see when I walk in my neighborhood park, I see them kind of concentrated in the rain garden areas, the tall, less managed grass areas and ground cover and prairie areas that are becoming more popular for wildflower strip or something like that, as opposed to in my, right in the baseball field part of the park that I walk my dog in, and we go out and look at fireflies at night. I see more in that stormwater detention basin or stormwater retention basin. That's where I tend to see them.
This is a good excuse. We have in my backyard a whole like it's like a wildflower-esque strip of land, and it's a good excuse to let it be and let the fireflies kind of hang out and
Absolutely.
nature do its thing.
Yeah, it's one of many great reasons why choosing to plant native and sustainably adaptive plants in a wildflower strip or something like that just pays so much more benefit back to you. It, you wind up after a little bit of effort getting it established, you wind up doing less. So it's also about, again, the take home messages today, you know, it's about what you don't do. Don't leave your lights on all the time at night. Try to reduce that. Try to go motion sensitive. It's definitely more energy consumption friendly if you do that. Don't put a lot of effort into a highly maintained, perfect lawn that has weeds. So it's okay. We can accept nature and appreciate interacting with nature a little bit more.
There's so many research. I saw, I think it was what, there's like 150 species of lightning bugs. Is that what it is?
Yeah, there are over 150 species of fireflies, and they range. The most popular one is Pyralis is the species name, and we see that pretty abundantly throughout Pennsylvania, and it's probably mostly what you're going to see in central Pennsylvania. But we also have some really threatened and endangered ones in our region. So there's one down the shore, the Bethany Beach firefly, that we're actually in Xerces seeking endangered species status for because it's threatened to wink out of existence. So it's something where we need to pay attention in order to preserve and conserve that resource. But there's a program that you can go and look at on the web called the Firefly Atlas, and it shows you a huge amount of resource that's there about understanding fireflies, what you can do to conserve fireflies. It's a great tool for us to learn more about fireflies, and then you can kind of participate in the Firefly Atlas a little bit as a community scientist, if you will, and thinking about your observations and learning about what you can do more to conserve them.
Are we seeing more firefly species becoming endangered or threatened to be endangered, or what's that list looking like?
As we increase our understanding of them and the habitats that they're in, I would say the answer is yes. Because we're paying closer attention, it becomes really important. So, for example, we learn a little bit about migration patterns over time. So Photurus pennsylvanicus, which is a state insect, actually doesn't have much of a presence in Pennsylvania. Maybe it historically did. So, but it is good. It helps us feel more connected, I think, to fireflies as Pennsylvanians too.
Why should people care about fireflies and putting these efforts in to help conserve them and reduce their pollution and whatnot?
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So many reasons. Okay, so reason number one is that they are great indicators of ecosystem health. So they, like I said, when they're in the larval stage in the soil, they're going around and hunting actively and looking to eat. And most of what they eat are things that we would consider to be pests. So they're hunting for soil dwelling insects that may be the same insects that eat our flowers or eat other things in our landscapes. Then when they're out there and they're adults, they're doing the same thing. They're inhabiting frequenting during the days. They're in flowers, they're in different areas, and their mode of sustenance is to eat other things. Most of what we would consider to be pests make up their diet. So they're definitely beneficial insects. They do some pollination too, as well. So that's great. So they provide this massive ecosystem service on the science side. So then when Casey puts his Firefly fan hat on, I mean, what other insect lights up your night like that and provides endless hours of satisfaction of you just feeling out there and feeling at one with nature than if you can go out, maybe sit at night outside with a cold one in summer and enjoy fireflies. So there's that aesthetic appreciation that they have there, what we would call, charismatic insect in that sense, and they're native to the Northeast, many of those species. So they're our own, and they're not going down to Mexico to overwinter. They're not a domesticated honeybee that we want to preserve. They're providing all that benefit, and they're ours.
So, is there anything else that I missed?
I don't think so. We have several different researchers who are doing great work throughout Pennsylvania. There's even a Pennsylvania Firefly Festival that people can go see. Most of the events are past or are full up with other firefly aficionados who want to go see fireflies in places where we know they tend to be abundant. So I would say if you want to find out more, you can go to the Firefly Atlas website. You can go to the Firefly Festival of Pennsylvania website and learn more. And we just encourage you to get excited.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.